I think Governor Romney maybe hasn't spent enough time looking at how our military works. You mentioned the Navy, for example, and that we have fewer ships than we did in 1916. Well, Governor, we also have fewer horses and bayonets because the nature of our military has changed. We have these things called aircraft carriers where planes land on them. We have these ships that go underwater, nuclear submarines. And so the question is not a game of battleship where we're counting ships. It's what are our capabilities.
Now, do you think that Romney just got a little bit under his skin? Do you think that maybe the president is a little bit worried and that's why he got snarky? You know, we have ships that go underwater, nuclear submarines, and ships that have airplanes that land on top of them called aircraft carriers, and we don't use bayonets anymore, which might actually be news to the folks in the military who were issued a rifle with a bayonet. In fact, if the president ever took time to go out to the Tomb of the Unknowns at Arlington Cemetery, he would actually see a man standing there in uniform, or a woman standing in uniform with a rifle that has a bayonet on the end of it. But apparently the president doesn't know that, and he's disparaging Romney for not knowing what he's talking about. Good luck with that, Mr. President. Fine commander-in-chief you make. Anyway, 866-A-LARS. That's 866-439-5277. And at the end of all of that, well, at the end of all of that, you get a guy who says, I didn't have anything to do with the sequestration cuts. How did that happen? The Congress did that without my knowledge. Wow, Mr. President, you really are out to lunch, aren't you? Charles is on the line from Kona, Hawaii. How you doing, Charles?
Well, we're enjoying it over here. I'm the, as I told your screener, I'm the father of Tyrone Woods.
Oh, my goodness.
And,
I'm sorry for your family's loss.
Well, you know, we were expecting this. When he left at the start of the summer, I talked with him. And I told him, I said, Ty, you know, for the 20 years you were in the Navy SEALs, I never worried about you. I prayed about you, but I never really worried about a serious injury. He separated both shoulders in the boat wreck, and that was about the only injury he ever had. I said, this time it's completely different, and I do not feel good about this at all. And he said, Dad, don't worry about it. He says, I can't tell you who I'm working for, but it's an organization out of Washington, D.C., and they never allow anyone to get lost, and which is true. Ambassadors normally don't get killed. So I was somewhat prepared for what was going to happen. I was afraid that he was going to come back injured, quite frankly, this time.
You thought he would come back injured?
I was afraid that he might this time. And when I got the phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning, 2 days later, it wasn't a total surprise, but I was shocked. And my initial response was, something is wrong here. Something doesn't smell right. When I found out it was, a consulate. I've only been to one consulate, and that was over in Kenya back in the 80s. And I knew it was, even back then when it was pretty peaceful, it was just like a fortified area that you couldn't even get close to. And I said, how could this possibly happen? And there's been some information that's coming out now that they actually had a drone above the compound.
They did. Fox News has talked about it. Now, I don't know that anybody outside the government has seen the video, but the video's out there of apparently the last part of the fight. Does that match with what you found out?
Well, I've just heard this just today, and like I say, I could tell something wasn't right when I was back there at Andrews Air Force Base when the bodies were shipped in. We were in a room, a building, a little ways away from the hangar where the speech was given, and for about a half hour, the president was there, the vice president was there, Hillary was there, Colin Powell was there, and when the president, we had 4 kind of little pod areas there with each one of the families, and when he came over to our little area, I could tell he kind of just mumbled, I'm sorry. His face was looking at me, but his eyes were looking over my shoulder, like he could not look me in the eye. And it was not a sincere, I'm really sorry, that your son died, but it was a totally insincere, more of a whining type, I'm sorry. and it was like just shaking hands with a dead fish. It just didn't feel right. And now it's coming out that apparently the White House Situation Room was watching our people die in real time. This was happening. And I haven't called any of these shows or anything, but when I heard that this morning, this is something I would really look into, and I hope that the public does not forget this.
Well, Mr. Woods, we won't, because those names, I mean, I understand that Ambassador Stevens' name has been mentioned more frequently, but the other names are names that people who listen to this show have heard a number of times since the killing of our fellow American citizens, because, you know, we admire what your son did. I guess it's just, we can't seem to get the truth out of this man, because they came out originally and blamed the video. In fact, at Andrews, when Secretary Clinton stood up to address the crowd, she referenced the videotape from this movie maker in California as being to blame for your son's death.
Well, this is what Hillary did. She came over and, you know, she's did the same thing, you know, separately came over to and talked with me. I gave her a hug, shook her hand, and she did not appear to be one bit sincere at all. And, you know, she mentioned that thing about, we're going to have that person arrested and prosecuted that did the video. That was the first time I'd even heard about anything like that. And, you know, apparently even the State Department had live stream and was aware of their calls for help. This was my son. He wasn't even there. He was at a steakhouse about a mile away. He got the distress call. He heard them crying for help. That's why he and Glenn risked their lives to go that extra mile just to take care of the situation. And I'm sure that he wasn't the only one that received that distress call, you know, come save our lives. You know, I'm sure that other people in the military, in the State Department, in the White House, received that same call that he would receive. And I'm sure that most military people would have jumped at the chance. You know, we are not going to allow this to happen. We're going to go protect that life. We don't leave anyone behind. We don't leave anyone out there on a wire, you know, just to die. We're gonna save them. That's what he did. That's why he sacrificed his life.
Mr. Woods, how did your family learn the news?
My wife and I, we've been divorced, and I probably haven't talked to her for about 20 years. I received a phone call that I believe it was the second morning after, at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was on this cell phone, a Hawaii cell phone. We used to live in Hawaii, and I've always kept my Hawaii cell phone. I received that call at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was interesting. I've been lying in bed. I had a dream that morning that had to do with protecting the treasure that's my family. And for about a half hour, I was just lying in bed, kind of thinking about, well, what's the metaphor of this dream mean? And then I heard the cell phone go off in the front room. I got out. There was a lady on the line, and she asked, you know, are you Charles Woods? And I said, you know, who are you? You know, 6 o'clock in the morning. And she says, I'm with the U.S. government. And then I says, yes, I am. You know, I am Charles Woods. And then she said, your son has died. I have a 19-year-old son, which would be Ty's half-brother, who's going to college in Idaho. And I really was thinking that was him. And then kind of couldn't really hear everything. And then when she mentioned Benghazi, I realized at that time that it was actually Ty.
What does your family do now? What's the best way for us to honor, you know, the service that your son did?
You know, I would say the important thing, okay, he sacrificed his life. He voluntarily sacrificed his life. He didn't have to be over there. In fact, my understanding is that he was supposed to come home a couple of weeks before this, and he voluntarily re-upped when they asked him to. He was going to, he'd actually told people, he had a son that was born in Kai, which is Hawaiian for water, who he'd only spent a couple of days with. He'd already made statements that this was going to be the last time he took one of these assignments after his retirement. In 6 more days, he would have been home. It's, you know, it's not a matter of honoring him or anyone else, but And it's not a matter of being mad at anyone either. But just what's coming out right now, kind of the whole feeling that I got about this when it happened is we're not being told the truth. Something fishy is about what happened over there. This just doesn't happen. And now this information coming out about, videos being live streamed, calls for help being sent to the White House station room, whatever that is. It's just, we need to make sure that this does not happen again. Ty isn't the only military person that's willing to lay down his life for his buddies, for the other people that he works with.
No doubt.
Every person in the military is willing to do that. And it would just be a matter of I don't know, for people to continue to be courageous. He's gone. He's dead. One of these days, I feel I'll see my son in heaven. And I'm not mad at anyone. So it's not a matter of revenge or anything like that. Hillary said, we're going to go and we're going to, take care of these people that were responsible for your son's death. Like I told the Libyan, I think it was the president that was there in the hangar, I total forgiveness. I'm not mad at anyone. But it's just, the truth needs to be out so something like this doesn't happen again. So that, people like Ty, who are out there, principled men and women now, that are willing to sacrifice their lives, that they won't be abandoned by their commander-in-chief.
Or by their fellow citizens, because we plan to take care of them and their families. Mr. Woods, how did your son end up with that nickname? I've wondered. Yeah. No.
Well, actually, Ty was a name that I chose, and it was actually, I had a swimming instructor when I was young. He happened to be.
But he had a nickname as well.
Oh, they called him Roan. I had never heard that, but some of the Navy SEALs called him Roan because of Tyrone.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
Yeah, I'd never heard anyone ever call him Roan before all this happened. Well, I always just called him Ty.
Mr. Woods, God bless you and your family, and I'm sorry for your sacrifice, but I very much appreciate you picking up the phone and taking the effort to call us.
Like I say, I haven't done this before, but when I heard, that there's a very good chance that the White House, as well as other members of the military, knew what was going on, and obviously someone had to say, don't go rescue him, because every person in the military, their first response were, we're going to go rescue him. So we need to find out who it was that gave that command, do not rescue him.
Mr. Woods, they were only an hour away, too. As I understand it, there were military troops within an hour's flight away who could have been, brought in by air.
I was told that by military, that there was a C, something there, another, I don't know what the C with some letters after it.
130.
After it, that could have come above that and completely carpeted the area and prevented it from happening.
Mr. Woods, it is such an honor that you'd choose me to call, and I really appreciate you taking the time, and you go with our prayers and our best wishes and our sympathy for your family and our thanks for your son's service.
Well, we do need to find out who it was that gave the order not to protect our military people there.
You're right, and by the way, that
needs to have the guts to stand up and say, I was the one that gave the order not to send troops to protect, because they could have, the military would have wanted to. Someone had to have said, don't rescue them.
You're right. Mr. Woods, thank you so much. And again, the president was asked that very question the other night. Charles Woods is the father of Tyrone Woods, who gave up his life trying to protect our ambassador. You're listening to the Lars Larson Show.